Captain Tom, at last count, World War II veteran Captain Tom, has raised more than $23 million to support the National Health Service in the UK after walking 100 laps in his garden. He's 99, and his incredible feat even earned him a shout-out from Britain's Prince William, who called him an absolute legend.
It's amazing. And what I love also is that he's a 99-year-old war vet. He's been around a long time, knows everything. And it's wonderful that everyone kind of is being inspired by his story and his determination. 18 million pounds, that's $23 million. What's your reaction?
I think I'm absolutely overwhelmed by this sum of money. I mean, when you transfer it into American dollars, it's even bigger.
Today is Friday, April 17th, 2020. Current numbers, 2.2 million cases around the world, 153,000 deaths. United States numbers, 698,000 total cases, almost 37,000 deaths at the time of filming this. Once again, it still looks like the curve has stabilized and we're on the way down in terms of daily new cases. Although I heard someone recently say that the number of testing has gone down recently, so I don't know if that's true or not. And if you look at daily deaths, we're definitely down from that ridiculous spike on April 14th where they added a bunch of deaths in. On April 15th, we have 2,618 deaths, and yesterday, April 16th, 2,174.
Well, did you hear Wuhan has updated their death numbers?
I did hear that.
50%, bringing it to a whopping 1,300 extra deaths now.
China has reported a 50% rise in the number of people who've died of COVID-19 in the city of Wuhan. It's a major revision of its data. The total number of confirmed deaths in China, now more than 4,500, which is an increase of more than 1,200. News of the amended death toll came shortly after state media reported that China's economy had contracted by nearly 7% in the first quarter of the year. That is the first contraction of the Chinese economy for at least 3 decades.
Yeah. And infections, they updated that too, and now there's an extra 325 infections on their numbers.
Yeah, so the story that I was reading was, due to the world pressure of releasing more accurate numbers, China's added 50% to the death count, which is still insanely low if it, in fact, started there.
What does that mean? Like, under pressure, we revised our numbers to the truth, or we just added some to make people happy?
I think their argument is we didn't test these dead bodies, so we don't know for sure. But since you guys are saying that we're not being honest...
And they were able to test 1,300 new bodies or find...
No, I think they just assumed. It's kind of like what the United States did 2 or 3 days ago. We just assumed that these people may have died, so we just added them to the numbers.
It's going to be a disaster if we find out that half the people that have died from coronavirus didn't actually die from coronavirus.
Oh, I mean, obviously that has to be happening to a certain extent.
But to what degree?
Yeah,
I mean, you can quickly get to where, depending on the number of deaths, if you can take a lot of those deaths out of that number, and then you can also multiply many more asymptomatic people, you can quickly get this down to levels of the flu. People keep getting so mad at that concept. Did you see that Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil, some of these TV doctors, have been under scrutiny today? Because I think Dr. Phil has another video out where he's arguing that we don't say anything about car deaths and about smoking and about all these other things that kill way more people than...
Yeah, and I recorded a clip of a left-leaning news channel going after them, what I feel like is ridiculous and unfair, and then I recorded a clip from Tucker Carlson going completely unfair about the Michigan issue. Let's go ahead and play the clip from MSNBC first.
This Dr. Phil from last night. Listen to Dr. Phil from last night, and let's try to figure out what the hell is going on.
250 people a year die from poverty, and the poverty line is getting such that more and more people are going to fall below that because the economy is crashing around us, and they're doing that because people are dying from the coronavirus. I get that, but look, the fact of the matter is we have people dying. 45,000 people a year die from automobile accidents, 480,000 from cigarettes, 360,000 a year from swimming pools, but we don't shut the country down for that. But yet we're doing it for this.
I mean, Willie, the stupidity of that, I'll let others explain just how stupid that is. And here's another TV doctor, Dr. Oz, just saying, yeah, kids are going to die. Here, roll the tape.
Yeah, I tell you, schools are a very appetizing opportunity. I just saw a nice piece in The Lancet arguing that the opening of schools may only cost us 2 to 3% in terms of total mortality. And, you know, that's any life is a life lost. But to get every child back into a school where they're safely being educated, being fed, and making the most out of their lives with a theoretical risk in the backside, it might be a trade-off some folks would consider.
Willie,
tried to walk it back last night, but
2 to 3% mortality for our children? I mean, my God.
Dr. Phil was simply saying that people die in huge, crazy numbers every single year from things that we don't even care about and we do nothing about, and that throwing people into poverty will also cause death. We've been saying this for the last month on this video. That's incredibly reasonable to say. And that's not offensive at all.
Well, maybe we're going to get called out soon when somebody
Bring it on, I don't care.
Back 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Oz is also making a very reasonable point. And these stupid newscaster people are like, he's calling for 3% of our children to die. That is not at all what he is suggesting. I believe what Dr. Oz is saying is that 2 to 3% of all coronavirus deaths could be attributed to young children going to school. That's, you know, them sharing the
2 to 3% of the 2% total. Is that what he's saying?
Yes, not 2% of the U.S. population. And I assume that these newscasters know this, but they just are piling on, and it's ridiculous. You know, I feel like that's the definition of fake news. But going to the other side, I was watching Tucker Carlson, and I feel like what Tucker Carlson did or said was even more ridiculous. So check this clip out.
Thousands of Michigan residents drove to the state capitol in Lansing to express their displeasure. They didn't hurt anyone while they were there. They did it peacefully, as is their enshrined right under the American Constitution. But Governor Whitmer didn't like this. In fact, she was outraged. If there's one thing Gretchen Whitmer doesn't care for, it's civil disobedience, especially when it's aimed at her. As Whitmer explained yesterday, complaining about her decisions could kill people.
You know, when people are flying the Confederate flag and untold numbers who gassed up on the way here or grabbed a bite on the way home, we know that this rally endangered people.
When you disagree with Gretchen Whitmer, you endanger the public. That's the new standard in Michigan.
So I feel like what Tucker said here is more outrageous. Obviously, what she said was totally true and reasonable. She wasn't saying that if you disagree with her, you are a murderer. And I don't know. I just don't feel like you're doing the American people any favors by being so outrageous with your reporting.
Well, I'm so curious to know if other countries are dealing with this, because we've had these identity politics and we've had this reactionary politics in our country for feels like the last 10 or 15 years. I don't remember it being all that bad. Maybe it was like the end of Bush's term, maybe Obama's 8 years, and then now for sure into Trump's 4 years. But I just feel like, is this a thing that's only going on in America, or is everyone outraged by everything, you know? Because it feels like it's gotten to the point where you can't watch TV at all without this being thrown in your face.
Yeah, and I assume it comes down to ratings, you know, because there are other news shows that are a little bit more reasonable, but I don't know how to find them.
They're on during the day.
Maybe they're on during the day.
When people are at work and kids are at school.
But my point is I don't have television and cable. I'm getting all of my news from websites and then from YouTube clips from these different news shows. So if Tucker Carlson says something that's ridiculous, then that's going to be recommended to me by the YouTube algorithm because everybody's watching it. And then the reasonable news shows that just report the facts are probably buried, or maybe they don't even upload them to YouTube. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I've really formed this thought thoroughly, but I kind of go back to like the idea of like if one person dies from these policies, and I'm like, well, what about liquor stores that are open? What about Philip Morris that makes cigarettes that kills more than anybody every year than all of this stuff combined? What about marijuana stores that are selling medicinal marijuana? What about, I mean, just name a bunch of things. Like there's tons of people that are responsible for some deaths, you know? What about anti-vaxxers? What about people that get the flu and go to work and get their loved ones sick, you know, and their coworkers sick? Now, maybe people aren't dying at the same rates, but you could say, if I gave the flu to you and then you gave the flu to some old lady, then like maybe I'm responsible for her death.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing, but for some reason we're on this high alert that coronavirus is like what I said yesterday or 2 days ago. Don't you have the right to go out of your house? And if you're worried, you have the right to just stay home? And obviously there's some part where those two circles do touch, and maybe it's the grocery store. But for the most part, I just feel like if you want to go back to work, go back to work, and if you are scared for your well-being, then stay in your house. And it just feels like you both have the same responsibilities. But when people just complain that, like, we can't let anyone out, it's like our civil duty, and I see Tucker talking about the Bill of Rights and stuff, I think there's truth on both sides, but
Yeah.
I think they then take, if you have these concentric circles, it's like they take the furthest most point. But I'm like, both arguments have a point.
Yeah, and you know, if the government just came out and said today, you know what, we can't do this forever. We haven't figured out a vaccine. It's going to be a long time. So if you want to go back to work, go back to work. We recommend young people go back to work. But if you are old, or if you know, have a bad immune system or whatever, it's up to you. But if you don't want to catch it, you better stay inside.
Yeah.
But we're not paying you to stay inside anymore.
Well, this brings up a good argument. Like, we'll talk about this for a second. I just talked to my dad. It's the first time I've talked to him in 2 days. So he says he'll come on the show, but there was no way. Like, he's going to Lowe's and he's doing all these little projects, and they're cleaning their dental practice up. They're thinking they may have to shut down. But he brought up an interesting point of like, what if there is a government mandate that says today's the day that everybody can go back to work? But let's say state by state, town by town, things are a little different around the country. What if he decides, I don't think I'm ready, if I'm high risk, to go back to work?
Right.
Then he's now forced to say, well, I have to now pay all of my employees in rent, knowing I'm not going to have any income coming in, versus somebody who might be younger and says, well, okay, I'll go back to work. And if all the subsidies and all the stimulus ends on that date, then the younger people are going to be beneficiaries. And the older people that might be a little cautious to go back out, or just like we were talking yesterday, people that have a weakened immune system, maybe young people who don't want to go out, they would be hurt too. So it seems very unfair to just put a hard date and say this is when stimulus would end, and this is when everyone has to go back to work. I don't know if that's being proposed or not. Maybe it will be some gradual thing, but like we've said, if you're capable of staying home and taking the stimulus, I would assume you would do that. Maybe that would be for the best, though, because if we just draw this out longer, it's going to hurt financially for the government, but it's going to allow more time to pass where the virus decreases. I don't know, but that's definitely one of his main concerns is when can he get back to work, and does he even want to go back to work on that date?
Well, my question is, what would you do? What would you do if tomorrow they just said, all right, guys, like, do what you want, but we can't stop you. People just go back to work if you want to. If you don't, stay inside. Because you've been giving me a hard time about, you know, wanting to do jiu-jitsu with my buddy and everything. So if the world opens up, but then you're scared, are then you still making me be scared? Like, I still have to stay inside.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like in some ways we live a strange life. And I think a lot of photographers probably live strange lives too, where you can sit at home for days on end and edit and make content and do photo shoots. If you're a photographer that doesn't depend on people, I feel like I'm just going to stay in the house and not a whole lot has changed. But what you're doing is you're just going out and then doing all this kind of reckless recreation. You're going to go do jiu-jitsu and you're going to meet with all these people and you're like living this life that I think the American people for the most part and people around the world, Their number one priority is not to go have fun, not to go join all these classes and go do all these workouts again and go to Disney World. They're looking to get back to work and buckling down and continuing to save because things are just still so scary.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know that that's a good argument, though, just because, you know, it should be based on what's dangerous and what's not. And I would imagine
jiu-jitsu would be the most dangerous thing you could do.
That would be up there.
So why wouldn't you just not do it?
I would also imagine that children going to school would probably be much more dangerous than jiu-jitsu, though.
Perhaps, but luckily I don't have kids. We don't have kids.
I mean, your fiance teaches at a school?
Yeah, I don't think she's planning on going back.
Because of the virus?
No, she started more grad school, and I think she took on extra classes because of the lockdown. And she's like, there's no way I can juggle classes and teaching. She already tried that, and that was too much work.
Yeah.
So I think she probably won it, but...
But, like, restaurants have to be dangerous?
I mean, I think you can... I think there's a way to handle it. I mean, I just watched this video somebody posted from Shanghai. It looks like everything is back to normal.
你好，你好，帅哥，量个体温，谢谢。
好，谢谢。
好嘞。
你们哪个买的最好？
这个点的是最多的。
生意还是很好的，这个外面的位置100%都坐满了，我们这里都。工作日的中午还是有非常多的人，比我想象的多了。所以 Costco 在上海还是很受欢迎，而且他们马上。
And as you can see from these video clips, I mean, there's people walking around without the masks. There's people with the masks. There's people with the mask on wrong and their nose is exposed. But it looks like in Shanghai, nobody's really worried. So it makes me wonder, are they living in a false reality? And you would think in 2 or 3 weeks, everyone's going to get sick again. Or are we completely overreacting? And if we simply wear masks, and maybe we put up some dividers in restaurants, maybe it's not that big of a deal. I mean, an R value of like 2 to 3 isn't that bad. I mean, Ebola was like 10 or 16, you know? There's a lot of things out there that are way more infectious. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like we might be just overreacting a little bit on this. I think if we all wore masks and everyone did general social distancing. Now, I don't know about jiu-jitsu. I put that clip in yesterday's video about one of the governors saying like there's not going to be sports and there's going to be no stadiums. Maybe there's football teams playing, but there's nobody in the stadiums. Like, that's probably the reality for the rest of the year.
I mean, why is it okay to play football but not jiu-jitsu?
I mean, it probably isn't. It's probably the same thing. I would argue maybe we shouldn't be playing football either, but... I mean, with football, though, you're almost fully covered and you're just hitting people. You are almost naked, wrapped around somebody in every way, breathing into their gi and onto their skin, and like you're sweating out. Like, I know it's not transmitted through sweat, but you know, that's way more intimate than playing basketball or playing tennis or playing football.
You cough on your hand, you get the basketball and pass it to your buddy, and it's like, boom.
Maybe. I don't know.
I feel like you keep dancing between saying this isn't that big of a deal, I think we're going to get over this pretty quickly, but I'm afraid and I'm going to wear a face shield and you're not allowed to go outside.
I'm not really that afraid. I'm not afraid. People are acting like I'm this weak guy who's like scared to get the virus. I'm just very rarely going out. I go to Walmart once every 2 weeks and get a shit ton of groceries, and when I'm at Walmart, I wear the mask and the shield because I have it. And I put the hand sanitizer on. I treat everything kind of like Monty was saying. When I do go out, I make sure I know what I've done. I wipe my hands and use the hand sanitizer. But then when I'm back home, I'm not, like, this isn't consuming my mind at all. The first week, I really was scared. But now, like, I hardly even think about it. I'm like, I'm not going to get it. It seems fine. Most people that get it are fine. But maybe that's just because I'm living in this isolated world in Puerto Rico. If I was in Manhattan, I'm sure I would feel differently.
Well, to your point of it potentially not being as big of a deal as maybe we thought, this is breaking news. And
can you put up one of those breaking news?
I don't know where to find one of those, but I'll try. This is on Fox News, but I assume this is going to be picked up by all of the news stations because...
It's a big assumption there.
I assume. And the title is Coronavirus Antibody Testing Finds Bay Area Infections May be 85 times higher than reported. 85 times. And what the Stanford University research test did was they tested 3,330 adults and children in Santa Clara County. And I think these were just random people. These were not people with any symptoms or whatever. But it says that the study shows that 2.49% to 4.16%, I don't know why it's not just one number, but that amount of people had the virus. So they say that this data implies that 48,000 to 81,000 people in the county should have tested positive, but the official number is only 956.
How many? 80,000 versus 900?
Yes.
And this is the antibody test. So this means
Yes.
you've already been exposed to it and you should be symptomatic, sick, maybe even healthy now.
Yes. So obviously, you know, this is a relatively small case study, but it still seems like super interesting.
Well, this goes back to the study that Pi Jerza sent us about Stanford doing some tests, finding that like maybe a large population of Californians are already immune.
Mhm.
And then there was people on our channel that were like disputing that because the study wasn't done correctly or they made some assumptions, but this is Stanford again. So maybe they have an agenda to try to say all Californians have it, but it's definitely an interesting study.
And then yesterday we showed a clip that Chris Cuomo has infected his wife, or, you know,
yeah,
we assume that it was he who infected his wife, and she now has it. And we got a little bit more information about that. He said that her symptoms are not nearly as bad. She does not have a fever. And it's really interesting. You know, it seems like women are not hit nearly as hard as men.
Yeah.
She lost her sense of smell and taste, and maybe that's what got her to get tested. But the doctors are forcing them to still remain separated.
You guys can't be together now? I mean, I understand that you needed to be isolated. She would need to be isolated. But if you both have it, why can't you interact now?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but here's what I've learned.
Only we had a
I'm just
doctor
messing
around.
with you, Sanjay. You know I love you. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night, and I had a couple of hallucinations that I was a brain surgeon. So here's what they say. They don't know. And in the abundance of caution, I could get reinfected. So they want us to stay separated. We do have completely different symptoms, which is, again, part of the weirdness. The kids, now anecdotally, Christina believes that at least 2 of them have had it in the last few months. Why? Well, we don't know, but atypically long duration sinus fever lethargy.
Nobody knows yet if these antibodies are actually protecting you and how many strains there are, and can you get reinfected?
It just seems like they would want to do these tests, you know? I would imagine Chris wants to be with his wife. His wife doesn't feel that bad. Chris is finally feeling better. So it seems like Chris would be willing to take a risk and just say, hey, study me. If I get it again, like, we learned something.
Did you see this clip of Chris Cuomo a few days ago on his radio show where he says he has had like an eye-opening moment with this, and that he realizes everything he's doing on the news, he's listening to Democrats that are constantly lying to him, and he knows that they're lying, and he's hearing Republicans that are sticking to these talking points that he knows are never going to be true, you know, trickle down and large government, all these things, right?
I don't like what I do professionally, I've decided. I like doing this show, I like talking to you guys, but I don't value indulging irrationality, hyperpartisanship. I don't think it's worth my time.
And he said something like, I might be done with being a news anchor because I realize everything I do on a daily basis is worthless. I'm paraphrasing. But he said something like, my job is meaningless and I'm tired of dealing with people that are liars on both sides nonstop all day. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I would want to.
Well, you know, I feel like this is probably, in the last 30 days, I have watched more news than I have watched in my entire life combined.
Yeah.
I don't even have a TV, so I would I couldn't even come across the news before this. You know, if there was something really big going on, of course I'd look into it a little bit, but
like Cybertruck or something.
exactly. But this is like all day, every day. It's all I'm watching, and it gets to you, man, because everybody's so negative towards the opposite side, you know, of the aisle or whatever. And when I look at these news anchors who get really riled up every night, you know, and they get angry and stuff, I'm like, that's gotta wear on you and your family and stuff. You come home thinking that the world's ending and Trump's trying to kill us, or on the other side, the Democrats are trying to kill us.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
We could talk a little bit about a controversial topic that's come up, and we'll transition to the SBA loans. I guess I'll start with the controversy first, and that is, I keep hearing, and more people are sending me articles, I have a video here, that some of the stimulus money, I think is it the $1,200 that people are getting, everybody's getting? Some of that money is up for grabs by people's debt collectors. And people are really upset about this, and I understand why. You need money to survive, but like, am I going to get in trouble here? On the other hand, I feel like if you aren't responsible to pay your bills and now you have money, like debt collectors aren't always, I mean, we have this boogeyman mentality of like, they're these awful people. But like my parents work in a dental practice and they constantly do procedures on people and it goes to insurance, and guess what? They can't pay and my parents don't get paid, and next thing you know, the insurance company is like coming at these people trying to get money for a procedure that's done. And you know, it affects everyone's livelihood. You know, for every debt, there's somebody that needs the money, you know, but we typically look at it as these awful people.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of outrage that I'm seeing online of people saying like, I got my $1,200, but can you believe that X, Y, and Z are now making claims on that money because I owed them money for it? And I'm trying to be sympathetic for that. This is a crazy time period.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, if you don't have the money to pay the debts, aren't you going to probably make more bad decisions with the $1,200 that you just got? And it just compounds the whole thing over and over? Like, who should be getting money? If you haven't had cable, I mean, I guess they just cut off your cable, but like if you haven't paid your cable bill, I don't even know if that's the correct debt collectors. It's probably credit cards and stuff.
Yeah, I don't totally, like I saw some people say maybe debt collectors. I saw some people say that banks themselves are taking the money out. So like the money is coming into your bank account and then Bank of America is just taking it out because you owe Bank of America. I don't exactly know how that works.
Maybe you have a credit card with Bank of America? Would that
maybe you have overdraft fees or something that are backed up and not paid. Yeah, I certainly see things from both sides. I don't have much patience for people who don't pay their bills and pay people back. And I feel like people who don't pay their bills are also the type of people who rip off family members and friends and stuff and are constantly ripping off one person to the next and to the next and to the next. We all want to think that like, oh no, it's just somebody who's down on their luck this month and like everything's going to be fine next month. They just got to get through this one thing. But we all know people who never have money. And when money is good, they just spend it all and more. Yeah. And then when times are bad, then it's really bad.
Yeah.
But in this particular awful time, you know, we want to make sure that everyone has shelter and food.
Yeah.
But we don't want to give people enough money so that they are driving the Lexus and have the new iPhone and you know what other.
But then you're picking
stuff.
and choosing who the debt collector is. What if it's your landlord, and it's like you haven't paid? You're like, yes, all that money should go to the landlord who you're currently squatting in his house.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I just saw a lot of people mad about that.
There is a disconnect, and the economy is not the stock market, and the stock market is not the economy. But we've just never seen anything like this. As Rick just pointed out, the kind of monthly declines we're seeing would have been horrible annual declines in the worst of recessions. We're looking at retail sales down nearly 9% before we hit all of the state closings that we hit in March. We saw the production numbers, the worst on record. We saw, big declines in housing starts as everything came to a standstill, the deep freeze of the U.S. economy in an ice age, and the thaw will be much more slow and uneven.
I got into a big debate with another buddy last night who is currently buying a super expensive house in the States, and I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, why would you buy a house right now? And he was like, oh man, are you crazy? Like, I'm getting 10% off because, the sellers are scared that things are about to be bad. And everything's going to go back to normal in just a few months. It's going to be great, man. Like, all the previous crashes that we had,
it's buyer's market, man,
were because of underlying money issues. This time it's 100% the virus. And so, the second the virus is somewhat under control, everybody's just going to go back to work, and there's pent-up demand, and everybody's going to be buying stuff again. And I just said, I hope you are right. He was the second person yesterday who told me that. Like, he was almost excited, like, oh, it's going to be better than ever in just a few months. And so he was excited to save 10% on a house, and I was like, okay, just remember that, in the 2008 crash, it took like 3 or 4 years for the housing market to hit bottom. But many people are saying that even if we have some sort of recession, there's a good chance that it won't hit the housing market like it did in 2008, which, 2008 was actually caused by a lot of housing market issues.
Yeah. I've been wondering if, we talked about the condos yesterday, and we've talked about Airbnb, and a lot of people have said or pointed out that the number of homes that are being rented through Airbnb are very small compared to the number of actual homes available. But I wonder, can you have a home financial housing crisis with it only being like second and third and fourth homes and not the whole market itself?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because when you think like maybe all these condos, people aren't going to, we just missed spring break. There's a very good chance we're not, I guess some states had spring break, but I would imagine this was the worst spring break we've ever had. And then fall break's probably not going to be great. And people that own condos, those could all go into foreclosure. But does that affect single family homes the same way? Airbnb, a lot of those homes are apartments and single family homes or multifamily homes. Like if those start defaulting, is it truly like all the dominoes are lined up together, or could you have just, it could be the perfect time to buy a condo somewhere, but the regular housing market stays at the same prices that it's at?
Well, I think the vacation home rental market is the most
volatile, or
volatile real estate market in the world. So if you can play that game, you can make a lot of money when people aren't going on vacation for a season or whatever, and people are in trouble. You go buy something that people don't want to live in; they want it to rent out. And then, of course, if you just want to live in it, then that's the best.
Yeah.
Because you can live on some beachfront property or lakefront or whatever, or near a ski slope, and get a great deal.
Well, I don't know if I was talking on this show or if I was just telling you in the kitchen. I get those confused a lot. I had a chart that said, the number of rents that, the sectors of the renting market that were defaulting. And it was like, I'm just making up numbers, but they're close. It was like 80% of residential market is still paying their rent. 50% of the commercial market, whatever that is, maybe it's like corporate commercial, it was like 50% of them are still paying their rent. And then it was like 10% of the retail market. Now, I don't know the difference between retail and commercial, but like 10% of the retail market was paying their rent, meaning 90, maybe this is like malls, but 90% of the people, kind of like Cheesecake Factory, is that the company? They just said, we're not going to pay. And so I wonder, like, what's going to happen in the commercial world? Because before moving to Puerto Rico, we were very close to buying a commercial building for Fstoppers, and we were like, man, this is it's gonna take all of our savings, and it's gonna be the biggest thing ever. And now we have to actually go to a place of work.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be working out of somebody's home, and it was gonna be a really big change. And I just wonder if that market will ever rebound, if people find ways to work remotely, or if this is the area that's gonna take the big hit, and now's the time to get into commercial space and try to buy up a place. I mean, we know lots of friends in Charleston that own commercial spaces, and they rent them out to Dollar General or to T-Mobile or whatever, and it's just like, once you lock one of those tenants, they're great. They renovate the whole building. What is it called, like a net 30? They go in there and renovate the whole building the way that their store needs to look, and you don't pay for that. And then they're there for long periods of time, and if it's a corporation, they're paying pretty consistently, and then you're just responsible for the outside of the building and the roof, and like some of the, you can't let your building go to shambles, but if, T-Mobile wants to redesign the whole inside, for this next
I think
year.
in some cases, the renter might still be responsible for the roof. Like, they might be responsible for everything in some cases.
I know my parents aren't for their roof, but we've known people that had commercial places. We've known photographers who rented these commercial places that were garbage. And then they renovated the whole building for these people, had an awesome photo studio for 2 years, realized it wasn't a successful business plan, had to leave, and then this guy who owns a warehouse now has an awesome building. It's got bathrooms and stuff.
Yep.
And I'm like, maybe I should get involved in that. You know, it just costs so much to get into it.
Yeah. I would like to know a little bit more about how these retail companies get out of paying rent. Because I remember, you know, when we did our Ritz Camera Chronicles, we talked about how Ritz Camera just stopped paying their rent and just broke leases and just left. And
But they left within like a month, right? Like they
maybe
didn't go
so,
months
but
and
I
months.
think they were still locked in. You know, I'm sure you had to pay some huge amount to break your lease, which
And
we
does
were
the
told
landlord,
that they didn't.
does he have the ability to say like, I'm locking the doors and anything? Can he get all the product that's in the store?
I assume so. So I'm just curious. At the very least, he could hold that stuff ransom until the penalty was paid. But maybe these retail companies have the upper hand because they're like, listen, if you don't get us out of this rent, we're going to leave right now. And then when this opens back up in 3 months, your whole mall is going to be empty. And then you're going to be in real trouble. Like, nobody's moving in here, so we're not going to pay. Maybe they come up with some deal like that.
Yeah.
But this whole idea that, you know, when we read a month or so ago that Cheesecake Factory just let all of their landlords know we're not paying. It doesn't sound like that was a negotiation. It just sounds like, hey, by the way, we're not paying. I don't understand how they get away with that.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that's a death of that business. The landlord's pissed off, and if this all blows over and Cheesecake Factory wants to open up, they better have the cash to pay all of it right then and there, or the landlord's going to kick them out, right?
I would think.
And I mean, it costs so much. I would think it costs more for the business to open up a new store than it would be for the landlord to wait a few months. I mean, I guess they're both losing money, but I would just think renovating a space into a Cheesecake Factory would be so expensive that you wouldn't want to default on that once you had a store in place.
Yeah. I don't know.
The other thing, the market, market closed 2.6% up. Moderna, it's one of the stocks that I bought a month ago, up 15% today. And I'm reading that their drug that I can't pronounce very well is it's showing really good signs. Do you feel like with some of the drugs, I think there's been like 2 or 3 drugs, the hydrochloroquine and then the other one that Moderna is making. I'll try to find the name here. Do you feel like a lot of people in the media, because Trump touted those drugs, it's like there's this opposition to the drugs being successful simply because the president made it sound like they are working? And I'm hearing from doctors, and they are very divided. Many doctors in our community are like, yeah, the drug does show really good promise, and we got to keep doing it, but there's just not enough studies to say definitively.
Yep.
But then there's other doctors that are just like, all the studies you've seen are debunked, and it's just anecdotal, and it does not work. And I'm thinking like, man, I've never seen so many people so divided over something so exciting.
But I think some study may have concluded yesterday.
It just got through its first stage of clinical trials.
So people are hoping that this drug will be helpful. And it feels like because Trump hasn't mentioned it, that it's okay for liberal news media to talk about it in a positive light. But if Trump mentions it, then they have to act like it's poison.
So in preparation of my dad being on the show, he said quite a few interesting things in the 5 minutes that I had him on the phone. And one of them, he said, is coming out of Harvard. And again, this goes back to my dad. Like, there's probably truth in what he's saying, but it sounds so crazy. He's saying that, like, Harvard scientists are saying that, like, there's going to be a software that you could put on the Fitbit bracelets that people wear, and it will be able to detect if you have coronavirus. And I'm like, what? And he's like, there's studies that show that your heart rate increases when you get the flu. And there's probably signals that would indicate that maybe something is going on physiologically. But I was like, Dad, there's no possible way that it can tell you if you have the flu.
I mean, I typed in Fitbit coronavirus in Google and a bunch of stuff's coming up. Fitbit could detect early signs of the coronavirus thanks to an algorithm from Stanford.
Oh, it's Stanford.
And it's Stanford again.
Uh-oh.
They must be run by the
I thought he said Harvard.
Republicans.
Sometimes he does get the research university.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, your dad is like a more reasonable Alex Jones. He says the craziest stuff imaginable. And then you look it up and you're like, oh, okay. There has been a lot of articles and videos about people who are convinced that they have it and convinced that the doctors are convinced that they have it, but they are testing and the tests keep coming back negative. And was it you telling me about the 3 tests, or maybe it was Katie yesterday, that I think she said she knows someone. Oh, yes. She spoke to her mom who knows someone who I think worked at the hospital, was convinced she had it, took the test, came back negative. Symptoms kept getting worse. Doctors said, you have to have it. Took a second test, came back negative. Took a 3rd test, came back positive. And she was like, I've been sick this whole time. I definitely had it. But the 2 tests to begin with were negative for some unknown reason. And then Chris Cuomo was speculating, people got mad at you for bringing this up, that he was like, I think we're going to come to find out that this has been in the United States since October.
I think we're going to learn that coronavirus has been in this country since like October, that there have been cases. And as you guys both know, and I hear all the time from all over the country, how many people do you hear saying, I think I had it. I had this and this. I lost my sense of smell and this and that, but I never got tested. Those cases are like abounding all over the country. And I think that the frustration here is that we just don't know.
How many people in the United States have said that they had something in December and January that resembled this?
Well, not just that, and I need to look this up because I don't know, but a lot of people are saying that I had this horrible sickness and my doctor checked me for the flu and it was negative for the flu. Now, maybe that means they checked for that season's flu and what they had was another influenza that wasn't part of that test. I don't know how the flu test works, but there's a lot of people saying, I went into the hospital, they had what you had, I assume, and the doctors checked them for flu and they didn't have the flu and they were like, well, they didn't know about coronavirus. So they were like, I don't know what you have, but just go home and rest.
Yep.
And so it's now a question of, well, what did they have? And could they have had the coronavirus, but they weren't testing for it back then? I always go back to like, how in the world did California not get hit as hard as New York City? California is so much closer.
I don't agree with the closer thing at all.
I do. You look at communities. There's way more Asian populations living on the West Coast.
I don't think that matters.
Hawaii has a ton of Asian people.
I don't think it matters. I mean, you
should look at the flight routes. Where does Wuhan fly to? You should look at those. And if it flies much more to Seattle than it does to, New York's going to require a secondary.
I don't think it matters. I think if 100 Chinese people fly into California and they have it, or one flies into New York and rides around on the subway, I think it's doing more damage in New York.
I don't know. That's a huge difference. 1 versus 100. You have to say that the subway is now 100 times easier to transmit a disease. You remember it wasn't too long ago where they weren't really acting like it was on surfaces. It was like just coughing into people,
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden it's like we should all be wearing masks. Like, everything we said a month ago is now, it's like they threw everything out the window. It's like people were scared to tell us the truth. And then now we're like, surfaces aren't safe, our shoes aren't safe, the masks aren't protecting us, but they're protecting others, and you should all be wearing the masks. It feels like everything we were told a month ago or so is completely backwards now.
Well, I have another bit of information that's going to make you very happy as a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
All of the major news networks are now reporting that the United States government is looking into this being a man-made virus created in the Wuhan lab.
Whoa! Say this again. All the news agencies are writing stories about this?
Yes.
If I go to CNN right now, it's on the front.
At the start of the outbreak, this is where China directed the world's attention, suggesting that this Wuhan seafood market was the source of the novel coronavirus outbreak. CNN even traveled there just before the city locked down in January. Officials had shut down the wet market, and security told us to leave. U.S. intelligence officials tell CNN they are investigating another possible source, suggesting the virus may not have originated naturally as China has advertised, but rather that it possibly started in a Wuhan lab. Sources say it is one of many origin theories the U.S. is looking into.
I mean, I went down this road a month ago, and every week I kind of keep an eye on it because people send us so much stuff. There's a lot of people that believe this.
Yeah.
And they'll send me an article, and all of them are like debunking this idea.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be articles about it, but they always wrap up with like the debunking of it. But you're telling me there's new articles now.
That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you. That somebody even brought it up to Trump at one of the press conferences.
Multiple sources are telling Fox News today that the United States government now has high confidence that while the coronavirus is a naturally occurring virus, it emanated from a virology lab in Wuhan. That because of lax safety protocols, an intern was infected, who later infected her boyfriend, and then went to the wet market in Wuhan, where it began to spread. Does that correspond with what you have heard from officials?
Well, I don't want to say that, John, but I will tell you more and more we're hearing the story.
We know that there is the Wuhan Institute of Virology just a handful of miles away from where the wet market was. There's still lots to learn. You should know that the United States government is working diligently to figure this out.
Looking into it's a tricky phrase because of course the governments are looking into it. They're looking into everything. So looking into it doesn't mean a whole lot, but
well,
if they find out though that this thing did have human manipulation, what are we going to say about all the people for the last month who, remember I had that one video where the guy says he was looking at the genetic code and because I keep hearing people saying, even medical professionals are saying things like, this looks like it could work kind of like AIDS, that it gets an HIV, it gets into your body, and many people don't die from HIV, they die by AIDS, like weakening their immune system, and then you wind up dying from something else. And we hear that more and more with coronavirus, that you're not necessarily dying from pneumonia or dying from the virus itself. You're dying from something, your liver goes out, your kidneys go out, your lungs go out. There's a lot of research that's still pointing to this thing being a blood disease, that it is clipping off the iron off of blood, and it's not able to hold oxygen and CO2 as well. But man, if they, what will we say? Like, because right now we're already arguing if the World Health Organization and the CDC downplayed things, and people get really upset about that idea. But there's no doubt they did. They knew well before they said this was a pandemic that it was being spread human to human, and they didn't come out and warn everybody about that. So I think they need to be held accountable to some degree. But what happens when all these medical people come out and they just find that maybe it was manipulated? It's going to be a big backlash there. If this thing was manipulated in a lab, that's World War III, right? Like, it's got to be.
I don't know about that.
It's got
accidents can happen.
I mean, accidents happen that closes down the entire country for months and months. And, the world for months and months, and then all the lost income, all the deaths, all the famine, like all the stuff that's going to come out of this.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then what's so crazy is if China did manufacture this and it got out accidentally, but yet somehow their country has been the least affected by this.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem possible. It seems like they had some antidote or something.
But then the narrative. I mean, right now China's trying to fix the narrative by saying, oh, guess what? 1,300 people we've added to our numbers. But if they knew the whole time that this came out of a lab and they came up with this whole other narrative, I don't see how the world can't come together, and I don't know that we're going to go to war. It's very hard to go to a war with a country that has nuclear weapons. Any country that has nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
but there will be massive sanctions, and I don't know. That would be crazy. That would be crazy. But I've always felt like it's in the realm of possibilities.
Well, it is wildly strange that there is a chemical lab that does this stuff a few yards or miles from this wet market that they claim.
I think this military lab that they're referring to is hours from Wuhan. It might be 2 hours away. But there's another lab, the one that we did the video on where the guy's looking at the positions that were opening.
Yeah.
I think that one's like eyesight of the wet market.
Well, that's the one that they're thinking, at least in the news.
Okay, well,
things
that's
that
not
I've
the P4 military grade lab.
Okay.
Because many countries have that. I mean, I don't know where the nearest one is in the United States, but you could say, what if it's very close to New York? It's 2 or 3 hours from New York City. I don't know where it is, but a lot of countries have like smallpox frozen, and like we have these military grade labs that have, you know, some of the stuff stored and all the research is going on. But I don't believe the one that a lot of people think the virus came from is that level of security. It's just a smaller research facility, from my understanding. But
Well, we have a video fan question.
no, I was going to ask if we had any more of those.
Patrick and Lee, currently talking to you from Adelaide in Australia. I own a commercial production company and a separate drone company called Airworks and CR3. I've had to lay off all my staff and have a large studio sitting here doing nothing with about $500,000 worth of equipment. We have gone from almost $1 million in turnover to zero the last month. Haven't done a single job really. I have been toying with the idea of trying to get in contact with clients, but that has been hasn't been received well when people sort of assume that you're trying to get something from them, and advertising, marketing spend and dollars aren't. I am at a loss of how to generate income at the moment. I have the ability to do so, and I think I have the ability to help businesses at the moment, but I just don't know how to get in touch with them, and I don't know how to put myself forward in a way that doesn't come across as salesy or desperate.
First of all, let me say, it sounds like your business is more successful than my wedding photography business ever was. I never had $500,000 worth of equipment. So keep that in mind. But I will say, from starting Fstoppers and becoming friends with many ultra successful photographers and videographers, it seems like the key, and I would imagine you've already done this in your business to get to this point, the key is to create the work to get in front of people while you're not being hired. You know, like everyone says, the clients that are hiring you don't usually have very good imaginations. So they want to see something in your portfolio, and then they want to hire you to do that for them. And so if you're trying to, you know, reach out to local businesses in your area, then I would come up with some sort of personal project that could be positive, that could be viral, that could put people in a really good mood, that could, you know, safely bring some sort of service to the masses in your area that people would be excited about. I'm not exactly sure what this would be, but a great example of this is Jim from The Office. I don't know what his name is. Have you seen the show that he started on YouTube?
It's just like good videos or
something about good news. Like
yeah, just good news. Is it just good news?
Some good news or something.
Some good news.
Basically, he puts on a suit, he sits at a desk, and he got his kid to draw like the logo behind him, and every day or every week, I don't know how often he does it, he just does this YouTube show where he just shows some funny videos or some good news of things happening in the world while everybody else is talking about depressing things like we are.
And even in the midst of 24-hour shifts and sleepless nights, our healthcare heroes were missing baseball too. Well, for more on that story, it is my honor to go now to my very own hometown healthcare heroes, the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital COVID unit. Hi, guys.
And our videos are getting no views, like 15,000 views a day, which is horrible for us. And he's literally getting millions of views a day, and he hasn't had any YouTube experience whatsoever. The production value is horrible on his video, and it doesn't matter. You know, he's created something that tons of people want to watch, and I feel like you, with your knowledge and with your equipment that you've already got, you could do something so much better than what he's doing. And if you're just targeting a local market, I think that it would be relatively easy to pull that off. People are stuck at home. They're just sitting there watching the news. Figure out a way to get on the local news.
Especially if you could pair it up with like a really clever idea, like a coupon or a discount or an online service, or something to where there's value there, and people say, "Oh wow, the pizzeria down the street is doing something," and unfortunately, you may have to act as the advertising agent and come up with that idea, and then hope that it's profitable and it makes sense to them. A lot of these businesses don't have these ideas, and so if you can come with the idea and the campaign, you could wrap it up and it would be successful. I will say that there's a buddy of ours who, I won't say his name yet, but I've asked if he wants to come on the show. And he is a photographer who told me that he has a really big campaign for COVID. And I don't know if it's like for the state that he lives in or for local government or local market. But he just brought up something, and he was kind of just making a joke out of it. But like, there's a lot of public shaming going on. Like, we know photographers who are like, how dare you go out and do these campaigns? And it's kind of scaring a lot of people into thinking like, maybe I shouldn't be, Yeah. But I think there is a middle ground there to where when you look at people in Wuhan and Shanghai, people all over the world, Singapore, South Korea, they're going out, they're doing stuff, and maybe we'll find out that's a really bad decision. But I think there's a lot of fear-mongering out there where it's like, if I'm not confident enough to go out, or I feel like I have this, social justice position where like
and my roommate can't do jujitsu either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna stop you. I just will hound you a little. I'm not gonna like publicly shame you or something.
Okay.
But there's
what do you think this is?
There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of people that are like, how dare you go out and make these ad campaigns and do these shoots with people, like, you're being so irresponsible. And I think that's a bunch of hogwash to some degree. I think it probably depends on where you live and how many people you're getting involved with. Just like Monty said, you're probably not going to hire the same crew with all the people. But if you went by yourself and you have the mask and like you could photograph and film people not in masks, maybe they need to be in masks. Maybe that's what the market is now. Like, I think you can still work, especially in these smaller towns that are just not being affected as much. I think it's a good thing. I think very soon there's the debate, but very soon we're going to have that hard line where it's like, we can go back to work now. Are you going to go back to work? So to do that 30 days early, I don't think it's that big of a deal personally, but just be prepared for that. That's another thing where people might be upset that you went out and got the jobs.
Yeah.
Because they felt like they weren't supposed to and they had a moral obligation to stay home.
If you have a question for us, you can email me a video at lee@fstoppers.com. Please do not email me and send me like news articles and stuff. I appreciate the thought that many of you had to send me the videos, but you're clogging up my email with a bunch of stuff, and like, I'm already looking at so much stuff. I can't have my email clogged up as well. So please just email me if you have the fan question. I'm trying to stay somewhat organized since we're doing this every single day. And then if you have anything that you want to share with us, leave it in the YouTube comments. Believe it or not, we are actually reading the vast majority of the YouTube comments, especially within the first like 12 hours of the video going live. Once the video is up for 24 hours, I can't read the comments anymore. I'm on to the next one. But if you leave a comment early, I can almost guarantee you I'm reading it. And if you put a link, most of the time I will click through and just glance at it. So don't email me that just because I don't have time to go through everybody's emails. The last thing that I want to mention, yesterday we talked about Trump releasing like a 3-step plan to reopen the government.
Yeah, how is that going today?
I looked into it a little bit more. It's a little bit more vague than I was hoping for. Basically, I think it begins May 1st. Trump is basically leaving it up to the governors. He said he had like absolute power a few days ago, and now he's like, but I'm not going to use it. It's going to be up to the governors. So the governors can decide what to open up. And
somebody was making the argument on our comments. I read one. It was like, Trump knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, 4D chess.
It wasn't 4D chess, but it was like he is tweeting this hardcore stance so that all the governors respond and be like, it's us that should make this decision. So that then he knows like, oh, it is your responsibility. It's like a way of pointing blame and like setting a standard. It's the same thing we were talking about before. You make these extreme, Bernie Sanders says, we want all this stuff for free, hoping that you just get a portion of it,
But if that was his end goal, then Trump could have just said, you know what, I believe in states' rights, and I think each individual state is going to do a good job. And if they wait too long to open back up, they're going to have massive economic repercussions for that. So I'm going to leave it up to each state, but here are our guidelines. And he would have accomplished the exact same thing. So I do not believe Trump is playing 4D chess.
Did you like my Kanye video yesterday? I feel like that was one of the better edits.
Did Kanye tell the minister to shut up?
I think, when you go to some churches, there's like a guy over there who's just like, yes, Jesus, Jesus, yes.
Yeah.
I think there was somebody in the audience.
But he wasn't talking to the
main guy, no.
Okay.
I think he was talking to somebody like way off camera who was just like, yes, you get it, brother, go. And he was like, I need the Lord to move through me.
We're not. Excuse me, brother. I go into these streams of consciousness when I'm talking, and when you speak it in the middle of it, it distracts me. I really appreciate the support, but I would like for everybody to be completely silent so I can let God flow through me as I speak to you guys today.
If Kanye runs for president, I'm very thankful I'm in Puerto Rico. Away.
Yeah, we don't get to even vote for the president. So
yeah,
a lot of people are like, you guys are spreading your politics, and so I'm just like, I can't vote anyway. So
Exactly. All right. I think that ends today's episode. We will see you guys tomorrow.
Okay, so you say that the worker blames the way she was feeding the tiger on this event. What does she say happened?
Well, it kind of all happened all of a sudden. I was in a different area of the park when the emergency call came in, and I was the first one on the scene to render emergency medical aid.